I was home alone that night, and I could hear footsteps coming from the basement. The door opened slowly, and I realized it wasn't my brother standing there. I was trapped inside the locked control room, pounding on the rusted door, while something moved slowly through the hallway outside, dragging its feet and breathing like it knew my name. The lights had just come back on, and through the small reinforced window, I saw it stop directly in front of the door. It smiled before the power cut again. That was the moment I realized everything I'd ignored mattered. I had never planned to spend my Saturday afternoon inside an abandoned water treatment plant, but boredom has a way of lowering good judgment. I was 24 at the time, working nights at a warehouse and filling my days with sleep or cheap distractions. The plant sat just beyond the edge of town, half swallowed by weeds and graffiti, fenced off but easy to enter if you knew where to look. Everyone knew about it. Nobody talked about why it shut down so suddenly. I went alone. That was my first mistake, though I wouldn't admit it then. I parked my car behind a row of dead trees and climbed through a bent section of fencing. The air smelled metallic, like wet pennies and mold. Sunlight filtered through broken windows, casting long beams across cracked concrete floors. It felt quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful, like a room holding its breath. At first, it was interesting in a harmless way. Old machinery lined the walls, massive tanks with peeling paint and warning labels faded into ghosts of words. My footsteps echoed loudly, each one bouncing back slightly out of rhythm. I told myself that was normal. Big, empty places always mess with sound. I took photos on my phone, careful not to get too close to anything unstable. The deeper I went, the darker it became. The temperature dropped noticeably, and the smell changed from moldy to stagnant, like water that had been sitting too long. Still, I kept moving forward. There was a strange pull to the place, like I needed to see what was at the center. That's when I noticed the first detail I couldn't explain. One of the overhead lights flickered on. I stopped walking and stared up at it. The plant had been shut down for over a decade. No power, no maintenance. I told myself it was sunlight shifting through the clouds, reflecting strangely. When the light steadied and stayed on, my stomach tightened. I laughed quietly, more to prove I wasn't scared than because it was funny. As I walked on, I started hearing other sounds. Not footsteps exactly, but movement. A slow scrape, followed by a pause, then another scrape. It echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. I paused again, listening carefully. The sound stopped the moment I did. I called out for help, my voice cracking, echoing uselessly through the building. The ponding stopped. Instead, I heard breathing. He was close enough that I could see condensation fog the small window in the door. When the lights outside flickered back on, I saw its face clearly for the first time, smiling in a way that didn't reach its eyes. Then the power died again. I was lying flat on the concrete floor beneath the projector window, holding my breath while footsteps circled the booth from outside, stopping every few seconds as if listening for my heartbeat. The voice that followed was calm and patient, telling me I didn't need to hide because the gates were already locked. I remember staring at the dust floating in the beam of the emergency light and realizing I wasn't leaving when I planned. That was the moment I realized everything I'd ignored mattered. I had driven out to the abandoned Desert Drive-In theater just after sunset, telling myself I wanted photos for a personal project. It sat miles outside town, surrounded by scrubland and silence. The screen, a massive white slab rising from the dirt like a forgotten monument. I'd passed it 100 times growing up and never stopped. That night, with nothing waiting for me at home, curiosity finally won. The place looked harmless enough at first. Rows of cracked asphalt stretched towards the screen, weeds growing through old speaker posts. Wind pushed sand across the lot in soft, whispering waves. I parked near the entrance, stepped through a broken chain, and felt the temperature drop as the sun disappeared. The silence felt deep, heavier than normal silence. I started with the concession building, its windows shattered and doors hanging crooked. Inside, the smell of dust and old grease clung to the air. My flashlight beams swept over faded menu boards and empty shelves. Nothing moved, nothing sounded wrong. I remember relaxing, thinking this had all been built up too much in my head. The projector booth sat on a small hill behind the lot, a concrete box overlooking the screen. I climbed the steps slowly, metal railing cold under my hand. The door was ajar, creaking softly when the wind pushed it. Inside, the booth was narrow, filled with rusted equipment and tangled wires. That's when I noticed the power light glowing faintly on the main panel. It didn't make sense. There shouldn't have been electricity out there. I leaned closer, listening, and heard a low hum beneath the wind. When I stepped back, the hum stopped. I told myself it was a battery backup or some leftover solar unit, something boring and explainable. I didn't leave. I kept exploring, taking photos, occasionally glancing out the booth window at the empty lot below. That's when I saw headlights flicker near the entrance road. They turned off almost immediately. I waited, expecting an engine sound or doors slamming. Nothing followed. The silence returned, thicker than before. I told myself someone else was just exploring. That idea didn't comfort me. I locked the booth door anyway, more out of instinct than fear. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps on the gravel below the hill. Slow steps, measured. They stopped directly below me. A man's voice called up, asking if the booth was open. I didn't answer. I held my breath, listening. After a few seconds, the steps moved away. I exhaled, annoyed at myself for panicking. That's when the projector behind me powered on. The sudden whir made me jump, heart slamming against my ribs. Light burst through the window, throwing a massive, warped image on the blank screen. Static filled the screen, rolling and popping like an old broadcast searching for a signal. I hadn't touched anything. My hands were shaking as I backed away. Below, I saw the figure return, standing in the center of the lot, staring up at the screen as if this was exactly what he'd come for. The voice floated up again, calmer now, telling me the show always started late. I tried the booth door. It wouldn't open. The lock had engaged fully, clicking into place. The projector grew louder, the static sharpening into distorted shapes that almost looked like people standing where cars once parked. The man below started walking, counting his steps out loud, each number echoing unnaturally far. I crouched beneath the window, covering my mouth. The counting stopped right below me. Footsteps climbed the stairs slowly. The door handle rattled once, gently, like a test. He told me he didn't want to break it if he didn't have to. I stayed there until the projector shut itself off. When the door finally opened, I ran without looking back, not stopping until the desert road swallowed me. I never went back. Last week, I drove past the drive-in again, and for the first time, the screen was lit, showing a single word waiting for me. I was pressed into a dead corner behind a collapsed kiosk, watching my flashlight beam shake across the tiled floor as someone slowly dragged a metal object through the darkness, getting closer with every scrape. I remember realizing the emergency exit sign above me was glowing because it had been turned on, not because it was broken. That was the moment I realized everything I'd ignored mattered. I found the abandoned underground mall by accident while killing time between shifts. I worked security at a nearby office building, and on quiet nights I'd walk the surrounding blocks to stay awake. One night, a maintenance store at the end of an alley stood open, warm air leaking out from below street level. A faded directory sign beside it listed stores that hadn't existed since I was a kid. Curiosity beat caution. I told myself I'd just take a quick look and leave. The stairs descended deeper than I expected, concrete walls sweating with moisture. The smell hit me halfway down, stale air mixed with mildew and old food grease. When my feet touched the tiled floor at the bottom, the city noise vanished completely, replaced by a heavy silence that made my ears ring. The mall was frozen in time. Storefronts lined the corridor, their glass shattered or boarded up from the inside. Mannequins stood headless behind dusty windows. Torn banners still advertised sales that never ended. My footsteps echoed too loudly, and I slowed down, suddenly aware of how far underground I was. At first, nothing felt threatening, just sad. I walked past an abandoned food court where chairs were stacked upside down on tables, trays still scattered across counters. My flashlight caught movement once, but it was only a rat darting into a hole. I laughed under my breath, trying to shake the tension crawling up my spine. The first thing that bothered me was the music. It was faint, barely there, like a memory playing through walls. a soft instrumental loop, distorted and slow, drifting from somewhere deeper in the mall. It sounded like the kind of music stores used to play to keep people shopping longer. I stood still, listening. When I took a step forward, the music stopped. I told myself it was wind through old vents or some forgotten speaker glitching. Still, I noticed I was gripping my flashlight tighter. I followed the main corridor, passing a directory map with most of the "You Are Here" stickers scratched off. One remained, freshly placed, pointing towards the center atrium. The lights came on, one section at a time, and not all at once, just a soft click, then another, illuminating every third light panel above me. They buzzed weakly, casting uneven pools of yellow light that didn't quite reach the floor. The air felt warmer now, thicker, carrying a faint metallic smell. I became aware of another sound beneath my breathing, slow and rhythmic, like something being dragged. I called out, asking if anyone was there. My voice echoed multiple corridors, overlapping itself in a way that made it sound like someone else was answering me. The dragging stopped. The silence that followed felt intentional. I reached the atrium, a wide-open space beneath a domed ceiling I couldn't see clearly in the darkness above. A fountain sat in the center, dry and cracked, coins scattered across its bottom. One of the escalators suddenly groaned to life, moving upward without a sound at the top. That's when I realized the mall wasn't as empty as it looked. Footprints marked the dust along the edges of the corridor, fresh ones. They circled the atrium, overlapping each other in uneven loops. Some stopped abruptly, as if the person wearing them had stood still for a long time. Others dragged, the heel marks deep and heavy. The music started again, louder this time, coming from directly behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam catching a figure at the far end of the corridor. It stood partially in shadow, holding something long that scraped the floor when it moved. It didn't rush, it didn't hide, it just began walking towards me, steps slow and deliberate, matching the tempo of the music. I ran. My foot caught on loose tile, sending pain at my leg, but I kept going, ducking into a side corridor lined with closed stores. The emergency exit signs flickered on above me one by one, guiding me deeper instead of out. I ended up cornered near a collapsed kiosk, breathing through my teeth, listening to the scrape grow louder. When my flashlight died, the mall's lights brightened slightly, as if compensating. I could hear the person humming along with the music now, close enough that I could smell rust and old sweat. I don't know how long I was frozen there before the sound moved past me, circling slowly, patiently. Eventually, the lights shut off. The music ended mid-note. I ran when the silence felt less heavy. Weeks later, I checked the alley again, and the door was gone, sealed with fresh concrete, and the directory sign was replaced with a blank wall that still smelled faintly of metal.